Welcome back to the Journey to Growth podcast. Today, we will be discussing trauma bonds and how to break them. So, because the content of this episode is rather heavy, please utilize your resources as needed. We want to start off by maybe just explaining some of the misconceptions around what a trauma bond actually is. I've heard a lot of people describe trauma bonds as if they are something that happens when two people experience a trauma together.
And they get bonded through that trauma, like it makes their relationship stronger.
Yeah, exactly. And that is very much not the case. Trauma bonding is something that is created through the cycle of abuse.
Yeah, in the cycle of abuse, there's intermittent reinforcement. You have the calm, you have the reconciliation, like we talked about in one of our previous podcasts.
Mhm.
There's good and bad. And while it's all technically a part of the abuse, some of it feels really good or can be masked as feeling really good. And
Mhm.
that adds to that bond part of the trauma. And it
Mhm.
makes you want to continue to go back for more and more and more until it acts almost as if it's an addiction.
Yeah, it's very much like an addiction. It affects the brain in the exact same way. Yeah, much like what we were explaining in previous episodes about always wanting to get back to how it was in the beginning in that love bombing stage. It Trauma bonds act like an addiction because when it was good in that love bombing stage and when like it is back in the calm phase of the cycle of abuse and like the good things are happening, you get that rush of dopamine and it is like an addiction. And so when you're not getting that anymore, like you're constantly chasing that high. And so you become addicted to this person, to the person who is abusing you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, along with feeling that craving for that dopamine hit, you're also noticing when you're in that trauma bond that you're feeling a lot of fear, that you're feeling a lot of discomfort. It brings us back to that walking on eggshells feeling.
Yeah.
And it is really confusing to feel that want for that good dopamine feeling, as well as
Mm.
being fearful of the person that you're going to see. And
Yeah.
in a trauma bond, you don't know which person you're going to be getting. You don't know if you're going to get that love bombing person or if you're going to get that angry person or if you're going to get completely no affect at all. You have no idea. And that's what feeds that trauma bond is that intermittent reinforcement.
Yeah, because within a trauma bond, the same person that you feel love for is the same person that you're scared of.
Yeah.
You get both the fear and the love mixed in there. And it is so, 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 you said, just like you said, confusing
Mhm.
within a person's nervous system to be experiencing something such as a trauma bond.
Yeah. And you're hoping for that love bombing or that hoovering or those feel good moments where they actually show you some kind of affection and love and caring and empathy. But you also are feeling this like, am I going to get that? Or am I going to get this scary person?
Mhm. You could be experiencing a longer calm phase to the point where it's less of the, I don't know, like, when is it going to happen? And then, like, maybe you're actually starting to be like, oh, okay, maybe this is the time that it's going to be better and it's going to be okay and I can actually start to relax and then whoop, they rip the rug out from under you.
Yeah, it gets yanked out from right underneath of you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as soon as you start to get into that calm, relaxed, non-cortisol rush,
Hmm.
feeling, they could take it right up from under you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that intermittent reinforcement that they give you, it's so inconsistent. And that's one of the biggest building blocks of the trauma bond is that, you can have the same action towards them, whether it's, you know, extra compassion or extra effort with their love languages. And one time when you give that effort, they may shower you with praise, and the next time they may completely ignore you. There's never a consistency with intermittent reinforcement. There's never that consistency there. It's always, what am I going to get? And that's where that kind of addiction feeling, that trauma bond really starts to kick in.
Yeah. There's a metaphor that I like to use when it comes to the trauma bond and how it feels. It's almost as if you're gambling or you're playing the lottery or like a slot machine or something. Just like, okay, here, let me put this quarter, this loony, just let me pull the slots and am I gonna win this time? Am I gonna get anything this time? Oh no. Oh, there's a little bit this time. Okay, let me just put in like another, let me put in another loony. Or maybe I'll try even a toonie this time. And maybe there's gonna be a higher chance of me getting something out, like putting in extra effort or like extra affection, trying to be extra compassionate and understanding when even like when they have abusive behavior towards you. Am I going to win this time with regards to this metaphor? Or am I just going to lose my money and lose another piece of myself?
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it feels like. And it's so hard to recognize when you're in it too, because you just said, lose another piece of me.
Mm,
You've lost so much of yourself already trying these different things,
yeah.
not knowing what the reaction is going to be within that intermittent reinforcement,
Hmm.
because you try one thing and you get one reaction and then you try it again and you get a different one. So you've given so many parts of yourself. And I remember you talking about this in our last podcast episode too. You give so much of yourself away that there's nothing left by the end. You
Yeah.
just feel so empty. And that
Hmm.
itself is a part of the trauma bond as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You run out of loonies, you run out of toonies to
Exactly.
put in there. And pretty soon you're left with pennies that you're trying to polish and offer in any sort of way to receive love from somebody who is supposed to love you
Mhm.
and not hurt you, not abuse you, not yell at you, not give you the silent treatment, not gaslight you and do all of these things. But it happens.
It's a
Yeah.
manipulation tactic. And sometimes, like you said, they'll throw in a little bit of gaslighting. Oh, I never said that. Or
Mhm.
you
Changing
must,
what definitions of words mean, even.
oh, yes. So many of those in my experience. And actually, that reminds me of one of the gaslighty things that you went through in your
Mm.
relationship with the definition of the word weekend.
Oh, yeah. That was something that happened with relative frequency.
Hmm.
In my experience, the definition of weekend would change to fit that person's narrative.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the perfect example of gaslighting right there. Just
Mhm.
completely make you second guess your reality. 100%.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of future faking, which is a huge way that they create that trauma bond by saying, I'm not going to drink this weekend. We're going to have a fantastic weekend. We're going to get married in this year. We're going to buy a house in this year, and not actually working towards it, not actually doing anything about it, or blatantly lying that that's what they're going to be doing, like not
Yeah.
drinking on the weekend. But by talking about that magical future, it
Mhm.
creates that bond, that hope. And I
Mhm.
think a
It's
lot of,
it's dangling the carrot in front of your face,
yep,
essentially.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
These good things are going to keep happening. Don't worry, they're right here. Just you got to just make it through just a little bit longer and then I promise I'll give them to you.
yeah, they're coming. They're coming.
Mhm.
They're just around the corner. You just have to endure a little bit more before you get this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that dangling of the carrot that can create such intense attachment. That is one of the many different signs that you are in a trauma bond, and there are others as well. Some of the others could include, isolating yourself and not wanting to tell people what you're actually enduring, what
Mhm.
you're actually going through. There was so many times where I would talk to my best friend on the phone who lives in a different province, and she would ask me how things are going, and normally I would be so honest and open with her.
Yeah.
And so many times it was like, yeah, it's great, it's fine, he did this one little breadcrumb thing for me, but that's what I'm going to focus on because that's what I want you to know.
Yeah.
Thus isolating myself by not talking about what I was actually going through.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another sign of being in a trauma bond, and something that's really hard to catch within yourself.
Mhm. And you don't want to tell people that it's not good because there might have been times where you have explained the real things, the real true nature of what is happening to loved ones and now they don't like that person. And so now you do only want to really emphasize the good things that are happening to the people that you love because you want them to see your partner in the light that you're trying so hard to see them in and that you're trying so hard to get back to
Yeah, absolutely. The potential.
the potential.
Mm.
Yeah.
You're trying to show them the trauma bonded part of you by only talking about the good things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And saying things like the good outweighs the bad.
Mm, it's good more than it's bad.
The amount of times that I said that sentence,
Same.
both out loud to other people and in my head and in my journal, trying
Yeah.
to essentially gaslight myself out of the reality of the situation because the reality of the situation was too big to hold.
Mhm. And another sign of being in a trauma bond is rationalizing, just like you
Mhm.
just said. You're rationalizing, yes, yeah, it's bad, but it's good more than it's bad. Or it's more than 50% that I'm happy, so it must be okay. Or all relationships have problems.
Mhm.
There's so much rationalization that goes on to dampen the bad and to accentuate the good.
Exactly. Everybody fights. Oh, the it's just the honeymoon phase is over.
Marriage
Like,
takes work.
exactly. And it does, but it doesn't take work like the type of work that comes in an abusive relationship. Within a healthy dynamic, there is that give and take that is so much more even and constructive. You can have, yeah, you do. It's inevitable that you're gonna fight in relationship, whether that's romantic, platonic, whatever. But within a healthy relationship, it can actually be constructive because you're both hearing one another and you're actually receptive to like hearing something that you did wrong and making changes. Whereas within an abusive relationship, the abusive person, they can apologize and just like, oh, I'm so, so sorry. I'll never do that again, blah, 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 XYZ. But then they repeat the same behavior and an apology without changed behavior is just manipulation. And in a healthy relationship, that's not what happens because if you apologize for something and say, hey, I'm going to do better, you actually do.
Yeah. You
That's what's missing
try.
in abuse.
You try. You don't just say you're going to try and then don't. Yeah. I want to I want to repeat that sentence that you said. Apologies without change is manipulation. And
Yeah.
I think that is such a strong, strong sentence. And it brought a lot of awareness to me the first time I heard it. Apology without change is manipulation. It made me realize how much I was actually manipulated. And before hearing that sentence, I would blame myself for the change not happening.
Mhm.
I would take that responsibility. And that is a really big part of being trauma bonded as well, is you blame
Mhm.
yourself for what you're being put through in this abusive relationship. You take complete responsibility for
Mhm.
what you're going through. It's not right. It's
Yeah.
not right that you take that full responsibility as the person who's being abused because it's not your responsibility.
Mhm.
Full stop. It's not.
Mhm. Yeah, because speaking in general terms, there's a saying like it takes two to tango, but it's different in abusive relationships because there's a power imbalance when it comes to control.
Absolutely. And you hear a lot of survivors of abuse saying, I need to own my part in it.
Yeah.
And while that's true to a very small extent when you're surviving abuse,
Mhm.
that's taking a lot of blame for the abuse that you went through and abuse that was completely out of your control.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last sign that I wanted to talk about before we get into how to break and heal the trauma bond is the fear of leaving.
The thought of leaving, the idea of it is absolutely terrifying.
Mhm.
It can feel soul crushing. It can feel there can be moments where you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I have to do. But when you start thinking about actually taking that step, can feel impossible
Yeah. Completely impossible.
completely.
Mhm.
Whether It's the logistics of it. Like how would I be able to even afford living on my own? How can I how could I possibly be able to divide all of these things? Who would even help us move? Because like it's family that has helped, and like that would be a really awkward dynamic. I'm gonna lose all of my friends in this. Like there's so much fear and terror that goes into it. And even with all of the abuse going on, I'm gonna lose my best friend. I'm gonna lose my like what it turns into in a trauma bond, my other half, essentially.
Very
Like
much
this
so.
person makes me whole. I'm not going to be whole anymore if I don't have this person.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, it's how are they going to react? What are they
Yeah.
going to do? If
Yeah.
they do this, what they do in a loving situation, when I'm here and when I'm trying, how are they going to act when I've given up?
Yeah.
Because that's what it feels like. It feels like you've been trying so hard for so long that you're just giving up.
Hmm.
In reality, you're keeping yourself safe,
Hmm.
choosing safety.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like that.
Hmm.
And it's terrifying to think of how they're going to act when they're mad that you're leaving.
Yeah. Because the thought of them being mad at you when you leave, there's also that knowledge of, I'm not going to get that breadcrumb again. I'm not going to get that good part again. Because that's where the cycle would stop. And it feels like you're withdrawing from a drug
Yeah.
because you wouldn't get that dopamine hit again.
Yeah. And just like withdrawing from any other physical drug, you
Mhm.
really do feel that lack of
Mhm.
them, even though you weren't getting what you actually needed from them. Even though there was that intermittent reinforcement, you still got it sometimes.
Mhm.
So now it's completely gone.
But when you actually do leave and you find a different kind of strength to leave, because I want to just reiterate and really solidify that the the amount of strength that it takes to stay in a situation like that is astounding. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It takes an immense amount of strength to make it through a situation like that, to make it through an abusive relationship. And it just takes a different type of strength to get out and to stay out. When that capacity is created for you to actually leave, then that's when the healing can begin.
Yeah. Yeah. And that healing, it takes time.
It
It
does.
it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of gentleness on yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. There could be an expectation of, okay, I'm leaving, and so I need to feel better consistently all the time, every day. I need to feel a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. But that's not the case. As we know, healing is not linear.
Yeah.
You could feel awful and depressed and all of these things for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then have some really good days sprinkled in there. And then you can feel really shitty again. Or you can have a long stretch of feeling good, and then something reminds you of all of this grief that you're feeling, and it can pull you right back in, even in those moments of feeling like you're moving backwards. When you meet that part of yourself with compassion, that's where healing can happen also. It's not just in the feeling good. You're still healing in those moments of darkness.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the analogy where you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 step forwards, 1 step back. You're still moving forward,
Still
even
moving
though
forward.
when you're taking those steps back, you don't feel like you are. You
Yeah.
really are. And the meeting yourself where you're at and showing yourself compassion, showing those unhealed parts of yourself, that compassion, that is how we truly heal.
Mhm.
Making space
True.
for the joy and making space for the discovering ourselves again, or for the first time,
Mhm.
by allowing those harder, those darker days and really just being with them. And one thing that when I was in those darker days that I found really helpful was to grab my journal and just write everything that you're feeling in that moment. If you're doing self-blame, write it down. If you're feeling sorry for yourself, write it down. Allow it.
Allow
And
it.
yeah, completely allow it. Write it all down, write it all out, let it out.
Yeah.
People say so many times you need to feel your emotions. And I remember
Yeah.
hearing so many people in our class when we were in school say, okay, I get it. I need to feel my emotions. How?
How?
How do I, yeah,
How
how
the
do I
frick do I
do
do that?
that? How do I do that? And the first step in feeling, I just got goosebumps as
Mhm.
we were like, yeah. Um, the first step in being able to feel your emotions is to acknowledge them.
Yeah.
If you can't acknowledge the emotions that you have, what are you feeling?
Mhm.
There's no way you can feel something that you're not even acknowledging exists. So by journaling and allowing whatever comes to you, even if it's not words, even if it's a scribble on the page or
Mhm.
rubbing mud into the pages, it doesn't matter. It's allowing those emotions to transfer onto that paper to acknowledge their existence so
Yeah.
that you can feel them.
Yeah. A lot of healing can come through creativity like that. Like exactly like you said, it doesn't have to be words. Take some mud and throw it on a tree. Grab a rock and write a word on it and throw it into the ocean and like scream while you're doing it. Go into the forest and just yell. Record a voice note in your phone and like get out whatever you need to.
Even if it's
Scream into
just
a
a
pillow.
growl.
Anything. There's so many different ways to move through those emotions. It's what resonates with you, particularly as an individual.
Absolutely. And when we hear feel your emotions, we automatically think our emotions,
Yes. Intellectualizing them.
intellectualizing them,
Yeah.
feel them, allow them,
Yeah.
let
It's,
them come out in a growl, in throwing a rock, in safely, of course,
yes. Yes.
in a scream, in an art piece.
Yeah.
Just allow them.
Yeah. Yeah. Allow them. And even taking a step back, if you can't identify the emotion that you're feeling, what if it feels like it's like three or four of them all muddled together and you don't know how to distinguish one from the other? Just what sensations are you noticing in your body? Are you feeling tingling? Are you feeling hot? Are you feeling frozen? Does it feel heavy, light? Does it have a shape? Like ask yourself all of these questions and
Yeah, finding a way to allow the emotions without intellectualizing them
yeah.
is the first step to feeling your emotions. And in order to heal those darker days, in
Mhm.
order to help yourself forward when experiencing those heavy days, is to allow it. And that experimentation of how can I allow my emotions can
Mhm.
turn into something really fun.
It can. Yeah, those experiments can bring play into it. And when we are playing, our body recognizes that as safety. And so that's also healing. There's so many layers that you can put onto this. It gets me so excited.
I can see that. I can sense your excitement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Experiment and find what works best for you as an individual. Don't force yourself to fit into a box of, I have to heal this exact way. I have to journal this exact way. I have to do it exactly like this because that's not true. You are a unique individual with unique needs and you will heal the way that is right for you.
Absolutely. There's so many ways that therapy can help with this. And we touched on a couple therapeutic techniques just in our excitement there. You know, there's
Mhm.
somatic therapy, there's art therapy, there's narrative therapy. There's so many different techniques that can help us find that authentic way to acknowledge our emotions and move towards healing in a way
Mhm.
that works for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And a therapist can help you find which one resonates with you and
Mm,
help you if you can't think of those particular questions to ask yourself, like, am I feeling tingling? Am I feeling like these kinds of things? We can help you experiment with those things in therapy.
yeah.
And in addition to therapy, having a support system is really important too. And when you're coming out of an abusive relationship, it's understandable that that could be very sparse.
Mhm.
And so starting with a therapist can be really helpful, but if there's any family members, any friends, any community resources, like support groups that you can go to, or even like Facebook groups that you can join of people who have experienced the same thing. You can also get really creative with building a support system. Breaking the trauma bond itself feels like an insurmountable task. The thought of rebuilding your life afterwards can feel impossible, but it is possible. And it sounds again so cliche, but it just takes time. And there's no expectation for you to go from 0 to 100 right away. Little bits here and there will get you there. It's understandable that your capacity is going to be basically 0 at the beginning. So you're not going to be able to put very much into the healing pot right away. Your body needs rest at the beginning. Make sure that you allow it that. And over time, as you gain a little bit more capacity, you'll be able to put more and more into that healing pot. You'll get there.
Be patient with yourself. Be
Yeah.
kind with yourself.
Yeah.
If you are in a trauma bond and you are thinking about leaving, on our website, journeytogrowth.ca, we do have some resources for safety planning and to help you in taking that step. And we, as counselors, are also here to support you as part of your support system in taking this huge step.
Mm. Yeah.
We want to thank you so much for joining us today on this episode.
Yeah. Join us next time when we're going to be exploring all about boundaries.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.